I'd like to introduce you a bit to the programmatic assessment approach and talk a bit why we are looking at it with portfolios. And portfolios are really sitting on the side to the learning management system, so sitting to the side of Moodle, and can really also enhance the learning that your students do via the LMS. So my first question for you, I know it's right after lunch, so to get some participation going and making sure that everybody here is also present, I have a question for you. Have you already heard about programmatic assessment? Option 1, yeah, but I haven't really looked into it yet. Who falls into that camp? I see some head nods and some arms going up. Yes, I've already looked into it, and we actually already started using it a bit or exploring it a bit more. Is anybody in that camp? Right problem? Not really. Then I suspect we also don't have anybody in the camp of, yes, we are already doing programmatic assessment. No? And no, I have not heard about programmatic assessment yet. Tell me more. Okay, also a few hints. So we have people at the start of the spectrum. Yes, I've heard a little bit about it, but haven't really looked into it yet. And no, I don't know what you're talking about. So now that second question is going to be very interesting then. Where do you think programmatic assessment originated from? Was it in Australia? I mean, Moodle was born in Australia. Australia has been doing a lot of good assessment things, blended online learning, distance learning. Was it in Canada? Of course, you're doing awesome stuff here as well. Or was it actually in Germany? I mean, I need to bring in Germany somehow so that you know where my accent is from. Or was it in the Netherlands, just to throw a different country in? Where do you think programmatic assessment originated in? Just blurt it out. Germany, we've got Germany. Jack says the Netherlands, and he's very confident. Are you going to follow Jack's advice? Who's for Canada? We've got 1 vote, 2 votes for Canada. I'm sorry, I need to disappoint you, Canadians. Unfortunately, it wasn't you who had come up with this awesome instructional or learning design approach. It was indeed Canada. The Netherlands. I'm looking at a Canadian, so of course I'm saying Canada. No, it was indeed in the Netherlands. It actually originated in medical education. And so what I'm going to give you now is a very long definition of what programmatic assessment is. And I'll be highlighting a few words in there. The definition, I did not attempt to have that translated by artificial intelligence because I did not really trust it. So we'll have it here in English. So a programmatic assessment is a systematic approach wherein outcomes of a variety of purposefully selected assessment tasks are longitudinally collected, collated, and combined to obtain triangulated information about a learner's progress in developing key competencies or developing key competency domains and capabilities. The accumulated data provides a basis for collective decision-making on student progress by faculty, assessment of learning, but also serves to simulate progress amongst learners, which is the assessment for learning. So the important thing kind of to take away from this really is programmatic assessment is assessment for learning rather than of learning. It is over time, it goes throughout, for example, a program of studies. That's why it's called programmatic assessment, because it doesn't look at a course in an isolated fashion, but it looks at all the courses that students may take. So what does that then kind of mean a bit more in a visual way? We have the assessment tasks, évaluation 1, 2, 3, 4, and typically within an assessment, conventional assessment, you look at it from an assessment point of view, and within an assessment, you want to hit certain learning outcomes that students need to demonstrate those outcomes. And at the end, there's the summative assessment. It's a gray box over there, because at the end, you do not know anymore how much of that grade that the student has received was actually obtained through or demonstrating outcome A, B, C, or D. You just know this is the grade for assessment 1. And then that kind of goes throughout all the other assessments. And there at the very end, we have the overall grade for a course. And again, it does not tell you how much was actually really done for outcome 1, or outcome A, B, C, or D. Therefore, not really looking at how competent a student is in each of these areas. And so programmatic assessment turns that all a bit around. So what programmatic assessment does, it still has the same outcomes and it still has assessments. However, what is happening now is that we are looking at everything from an outcome perspective. So we're looking at the competencies of a student that they are gaining. So the assessment 1 has elements for outcome A, and assessment 3 has elements of learning outcome A as well. And therefore, we know what is happening in that outcome. And same thing also for B, C, and D. And then at the end, we have the monitoring that is happening. And again, we still keep it separate, what we think students have done for A, B, C, and D, rather than kind of mixing everything up. And that then results in an overall final assessment. And so the big backbone of programmatic assessment are competencies. So that we know this is what we want students to learn, this is what they are supposed to achieve, rather than here's an assessment, we want them to get through it, and then have a grade at the end, but we don't really know what is made up of it. And the other big component is actually feedback. Because in contrast to conventional assessment, programmatic assessment looks at feedback from multiple people. And so students can ask for feedback. There's also multiple perspective that can be included in the feedback, so that it's not just one assessor, but 2, 3, or 4 assessors. Yesterday or last year at MoodleMoot, if you happen to be in the presentation from Steve Massicotte from UDM, he presented on concordances. And so in concordances, you have expert opinions on what the experts say the answer would be. And so you have also multiple views of the answers. And so here with the feedback, that's the same thing. You can get multiple pieces of feedback from different people and different instructors, but also fellow students, in order to really have that holistic view and not just be singled out by one person only. And then we are also looking at the artifacts that the students are creating. So not just at the full output, but really what they are already putting in, say a video, a series of images, or text that they are writing. And they are getting feedback directly on those artifacts. And we can also have conversations within study groups, within learner groups. So again, feedback is happening there. So now, of course, you know, I like Mahara as portfolios platform, and we are talking about portfolios here. So of course, I now want to tell you a little bit how we are supporting programmatic assessment approaches within the platform. Because we are here at MoodleMoot, Mahara integrates with Moodle via learning, LTI, learning tools interoperability, so that you can bring portfolios to your Moodle courses. Because Moodle does not have a portfolio platform. So you are actually missing out on a lot of things if you're not working with portfolios. People have been using Moodle courses for that, but that is quite cumbersome because with what you do with a portfolio is that you can share it with individual people. You can decide, I want to share it with Sarah or Anne-Marie, or eventually at some point also with Jack or with the entire group here. And in Moodle, that's kind of a bit difficult to do. And especially when you're just a learner and not the instructor. And so that's where the additional software comes in, where we provide all of that functionality to bring that portfolio experience also to your Moodle courses. And therefore make it easier for you to work with a programmatic assessment approach. And so we have two functionalities that I think are suited to assist you if you want to look into programmatic assessment to accomplish that. Or even if you're not yet on the programmatic assessment train, which most of you aren't yet, you might still want to consider that you use portfolios because you can use them for assessment purposes. You can also use them for internships so that your students record what they are doing out in the industry, and you as lecturer can actually comment on what they have learned or give them tips of what they want to do next. Some of you might have already created their own portfolio. I know the person in the first row has a photography portfolio. So showcase portfolios are wonderful examples of portfolios because there you show off what you are really, really good at. Some of you might have gotten your current job or a previous job creating a portfolio to really show your employer, this is why you need to hire me. It's hardly ever because of the A, B, C, or D grades that you got at university. It is showing this is the presentation I've given, or this is the instructional design material that I've created. And so that is what the portfolio is all about. It really demonstrates your learning, it makes it visible, and it also helps you to reflect on it. And so Moodle has competency frameworks. We also have a competency framework. And so eventually, hopefully, we will be able to combine them. But what we can do in Mahara with competencies is we call it smart evidence, because the evidence got smarter than if we just had it on paper, is that we can align portfolio pages with predefined competencies. Therefore, we can also get comments and feedback from multiple assessors, also industry assessors who are not part of the university. And very importantly, because nobody really wants to read a whole wall of text, is we can visualize that so that it's very quick for somebody to take in where are you at in your journey. And I'll show the example to you in a second. On the other hand, because portfolios can be used quite flexibly, we also have another functionality, which we call outcomes portfolios, where you can collaborate with another person on the portfolio itself. That could even be an educator, and therefore can there also put regular checkpoints in, so that you have regular times, maybe once a week, every other week, where you have a checkpoint so that you can get regular comments. And you can also add notes from an educator. So this is a very prescribed way of creating a portfolio, which can be very useful for those that might have some learning needs that need to be accommodated. But it can also be used by anybody who just wants to create a portfolio with a bit more of a step-by-step guide. And all of that can also be visualized. Now let's take a look at smart evidence. This is essentially the first page of a portfolio. It kind of looks a bit like a dashboard. We have the competency standards on the left-hand side. When you hover over them or on a mobile device, click on them, you get to see all the standards that are included. You see the description so that you don't have to consult a PDF in order to find out more about it. And then you have your portfolio pages. You can have as many portfolio pages as you like, and in there you collect all your learning evidence, your images, your video, your transcripts, your PDF slides, your PowerPoint slides, and so on. And then you see a lot of bubbles those are the overall assessments in that standard, so that you know, okay, in the lesson planning, on the lesson planning page, my evidence on that page maps to all of these competencies. And one of my assessors has already looked at it and said, yes, I agree with you there. Another one thinks I've even done better. I've exceeded the standard. And so we can very quickly see visually who has already looked at the portfolio, who hasn't yet looked at the portfolio, and where do I think I am. But that, of course, for programmatic assessment is not as important, because more important is the actual feedback. And so we can also collect that, because when you make your assessment, you can select from one of those options to have that quick overview, but then you can also give your own feedback. And importantly, you also have access to the previous feedback from somebody else. So one instructor is not the only person to give feedback. You can have multiple instructors interacting on it. And because you can see who all the assessors are, you can see, okay, this, my instructor agreed with me, is okay with what I have collected, gave me good feedback, but my industry mentor asked me still to do a few things, because they are the experts in their field, so they still want me to add a bit more. So I can then decide if I want to do more in that. And so we are not giving a pass-fail grade here. We are really looking at one competency at a time and can give students feedback on that. Now, the second functionality that I introduced to you is the outcomes. So that is also kind of a dashboard page where we have an overall progress that tells us how much we've already accomplished within the portfolio. And we have the portfolio pages listed. So that is a different view, because there we don't necessarily want to create one page and demonstrate multiple competencies on it, but only one page goes for one competency. So in certain study programs, that is easier for them to work with. And so then the student can say, yes, I've finished that, and an instructor can also sign it off. And they can have checkpoints directly in the portfolio, providing feedback right next to the artifacts, so that they know directly what they are commenting on, and also the students can comment on it. So it's not only the instructors. In contrast to the learning management system Moodle, Mahara is pretty egalitarian. In Moodle, you have all your roles at your university. You probably defined a whole bunch yourself, what an instructor can do, what a teaching assistant can do, what a learner can see, whether there's somebody else in there, the instructional designer. In Mahara, we pretty much have the learner and a staff member. And then, yes, we also have administrators, but everybody, as soon as they have an account, can start creating a portfolio. Because while, of course, we talk a lot about student portfolios, it is actually all of you here as well who can create portfolios and who might like to try it out. And so I would like to invite you to answer this question for yourself. Are you interested now, after this very brief presentation, to check out what programmatic assessment is? So, are you interested in assessment for learning, not just assessment of learning? So kind of formative assessment. I see a good number of head nods here. Do you want to engage your students and staff in dialogue through feedback and make that a really good way for students to learn? Do you also want to prepare your students for their future career? See a few more head nods. I think I've seen some head nods for 3 times already. Let's have some more come in. And last but not least, are you interested in lifelong learning to support that? There were even more head nods for that. So if you answered if you kind of put a check mark for you next to all of these 4 statements, or at minimum 2 of them, let's even say 1 of them, I'd like to invite you to really check out programmatic assessment and see if that is something that you would like to investigate more. It doesn't mean you need to throw out everything else you have done so far. It is one tool in the toolbox of an instructional designer. But it is one that becomes more and more important because the conventional assessment simply doesn't work anymore. We need new ways of engaging students, of making sure that they are not just regurgitating knowledge, because nowadays they can just ask a chatbot to write an essay for them, and then we have the problem of figuring out if they wrote it themselves or not. But instead, with the portfolio, what you can do is really go deeper into the learning of what the student had done, so that they also need to say what they have learned and what of that learning they take with them for their future, so that they become these reflective practitioners and therefore in future also know how to transfer knowledge, how to move from one thing to the next and learn something new, so that they're really on that lifelong learning journey, rather than only say, I've studied this, now I need to do this over here, and I don't know how to connect things. We need to help them make those connections and help them early on so that they get used to that and that they are also not afraid of feedback and also take on the feedback from multiple people. If you want to know more about portfolios, I invite you now also to take one of the stickers or put the URL into your browser, podcast.mahara.org, where we have case studies of how organizations around the world are using portfolios. It is not all on programmatic assessment. We talk about internships, apprenticeships, showcase portfolios, how students can be encouraged with real-life medals to create portfolios. So lots and lots of different stories of how you can put portfolio practice into your classroom or into your organization. So wonderful stories from people around the world. And if you have any questions for me, please do feel free to take one of my cards or send me an email afterwards or connect with me on one of the 2 social media sites that are up there, which is LinkedIn and also Mastodon. And now I think we have 5 minutes and 15 seconds counting for any questions. Thank you so much for the wonderful big display there.